all so much for being here. It's just, it's amazing to see so many people give up a sunny Sunday afternoon to come sit in a room and listen to people talk about books. But, you know, it's important to note that 40 million adult Americans are functionally illiterate. That is, they cannot read above the 4th grade level. And 1 in 6 adults in this country cannot read above the 4th grade level. And I think it's important to support books. I think it really matters. And in fact, a typical book only sells 250 copies a year. So I hope today you'll buy a book. It doesn't have to be mine, but please consider buying one or more of the books that are available. And you know that since most of you are vegan, the more vegan books you buy, the more you help get those books into the mainstream culture and make them appealing to non-vegans. And ultimately, that's our goal. I didn't write this book to preach to the choir. I wrote it to reach the mainstream audience. And I think most of the other authors here will tell you the same thing. So as you buy those books and their sales increase, that helps them seem appealing to the mainstream audience. I'd like to tell you why I wrote this book. Several years, where are my manners? I want to thank Jaya and everyone at Compassion Over Killing for putting together this wonderful event. How fantastic is this? I'm so honored to be part of this group, and I'm so honored to be invited. I hope this will be an annual tradition. It's really fantastic. And thank you so much, Prabhat, and everyone involved in the museum for hosting this terrific event. Several years ago, I sent an email to a bunch of friends with a factory farming video link in it. I asked people for their thoughts on the video, and I got a number of responses back, but the one that was really the most interesting was from a law professor and dean of a major law school who said, the images in the video were disturbing and deplorable, but in his view, they were illegal, and that meant that they were an anomaly or an exception, and they didn't represent a systemic problem. They didn't give rise to a cause for concern on his part. And I simply didn't know how to respond to that at the time. I didn't know much about the law with respect to farm animals and cruelty protections. But as a lawyer, I do have access to some resources, and I set about researching and looking into it, and what I found out really stunned me. And that is that in the last 30 years in this country, animal food producers have embarked on an aggressive and systematic campaign not only to emasculate all anti-cruelty protections that once applied to farm animals, but to make it difficult to investigate, sue, and criticize them. And these laws don't help consumers, and they don't help animals. They help one group of people. That's animal food producers. They surround these producers with a valuable framework of economic benefits. And as I learned about this legal framework, and as I learned about how powerful these economic effects were, I thought maybe there's a book here. So that's why I'm here today. So my book came out September 1st. It's been out about 2 months. It's been reviewed 6 times, and I'm happy to say that the reviews have been favorable. And I'd just like to share with you some of the blurbs from the reviews. Huffington Post said the book deserves a prime spot in the library of everyone who cares about the politics of food. Elephant Journal called it a bold, passionate read. Publishers Weekly said it's provocative and persuasive. Veg News called it riveting. Forward Reviews said it was intelligent and well-sourced without being academic and dry. And the Library Journal said it was well-researched and thought-provoking. So, and if I sound like I'm talking fast, I am. It's because I only have 20 minutes and I have a 40-minute presentation to get through. So I condense it all at the very end. For sitting here, one lucky participant will win this fantastic Meatonomics t-shirt. So, this is my first, and I've got these great foam board cards today. I call this New Yorkers Have Their Priorities Straight. And my September New York book talk came 2 days after a beach party that had 103 participants, but the book talk had 140 on a Monday night. So I thought that was pretty cool. Thank you, New York. One of the major themes in this book is that consumers have largely lost the ability to make informed and independent decisions. So if any of you can relate to this obscure 80s reference, this album is called Freedom of Choice, but as you can see, it's sort of an ironic title because the band members are not actually exercising their freedom of choice. They think they have it, but they don't actually execute it. And I argue in this book that animal food producers have largely diminished, in some cases eliminated, the ability of consumers in this country to make informed and independent choices about what to eat and how much of it to eat. And I'll talk about some of those ways in my talk. It's really the main theme of the book. What I will cover in the next 17 minutes is really three things. How is it that animal food producers control consumers to this significant extent? Secondly, what are some of the economic consequences of that control? And third, what are some things we can do about it? In 1932, Aldous Huxley published this book, Brave New World, and just like the Devo album, the title is ironic. Huxley did not really envision a brave new world in the future. What he envisioned was a creepy, dystopian future in which the government exists for one main purpose, and that is to get consumers to buy more goods. That's the government's purpose in Huxley's vision of the future. And the government accomplishes this through very aggressive messaging. It's constantly bombarding its citizens with messages that get people to buy more things. And for example, because it's better for the economy to throw away old clothes and buy a new shirt, pair of pants, whatever, some of the messages say things like, the less stitches, the more riches. Ending is better than mending. So people are constantly getting this stuff. Well, guess what? We are living in a Huxleyan society today because our government is behind a very aggressive campaign of messaging that is designed to get consumers to buy more animal foods. This is a really important concept. Has anyone heard of checkoff programs? I had not either. Checkoff, like check a box. It's astonishing that these programs are so incredibly important, and yet some of the most informed members of our community, including me, have not or had not heard of these until very recently. Checkoff programs are the programs that are responsible for messages like beef, it's what's for dinner, pork, the other white meat, milk, it does a body good. These messages are bombarded at consumers in this country through every medium, radio, TV, internet, billboards. We see them all the time. Everyone has heard those three messages and more. Checkoff programs are created by Congress, and the way they work is very simple. The first wholesale transaction where an animal food is sold, and they apply to everything except chicken, so beef, pork, milk, eggs, etc. So when a slaughterhouse buys an animal from a rancher, at that transaction, that wholesale buyer remits a small tax, in this case $1 per animal, to a central organization that collects it and spends it on two things, promotion and research. These programs are important for a couple of reasons. First of all, private industry is fond of saying, hey, this is just a private effort. We collect the funds and we spend the money, so don't get off our backs. Don't blame us for the way these things are run. We're just advertising our products the way McDonald's would or Pepsi. So it's up to us how we want to do it. But in fact, that's not true. First of all, it's not ultimately the wholesale buyer that is paying that tax. The research shows that the tax trickles all the way down and is paid by the consumer. Economists would say the consumer bears the incidence of that tax or bears the burden. So it is consumers who are paying that $1 per animal in the form of higher retail prices. But secondly, and much more importantly, here's how these programs work. In the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, oversees the appointment of their leadership, the collection and spending of funds, the creation of the messaging, and in fact it can edit the messaging, and it has its fingers in every aspect of checkoff programs. And for that reason, in 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court said, when a checkoff program speaks, it speaks the message of the United States federal government. A checkoff program speaks government speech. So when you hear beef, it's what's for dinner, that's the USDA telling you, eat more beef. And I submit that if that isn't creepy a la Huxley, I really don't know what is. That's completely straight out of this novel. Now, it wouldn't be so troubling if these programs were just sort of like, whatever, if they weren't that effective. But guess what? These programs are enormously effective. As this table shows, and this is the data that the checkoff programs themselves provide. In a typical year, animal food checkoff programs collect $557 million and spend it on getting people to buy more animal foods. And the result is an extra $4.6 billion in sales. So there is an 8-to-1 return on investment. For every dollar collected and spent in a checkoff program, $8 in extra sales results. These programs are incredibly effective. For the people in the room who care about this, this needs to be on our radar. We need to make ourselves aware of these programs because they are so important in this country and they drive so much animal food consumption. And guess what? The USDA doesn't actually need to tell Americans to buy more animal foods because in every category, in every age demographic, we are already eating more than we should. I use the royal we in the sense of society because I don't eat them myself, but as you can see, literally in every category, the USDA recommends amounts and people are consuming more. In some cases, for males in their 30s and 40s, much more, almost 2/3 more than the USDA recommends. Why is our government telling people to eat more of stuff that they're already eating too much of? It's just ridiculous. We have 2/3 of Americans are overweight, 1/3 are obese. We have the highest per capita meat consumption in the world. We've doubled our meat consumption in the last 75 years, and yet our government continues to tell people, beef, it's what's for dinner. Milk, it does a body good. Huxley. And to some extent, I'm preaching to the choir with this slide, and Heather covered some of this, and I look forward to reading her book. But as most of you know, I'm sure, meat and dairy cause disease, particularly at the very high levels at which we consume them in this country. In the last 30 years, hundreds of published clinical peer-reviewed studies have emerged in prestigious journals like the New England Journal of Medicine, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, that show that meat causes a variety of diseases. And I don't mean just cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. We all know about those. But it also causes Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Crohn's. Here's my list. Multiple sclerosis, arthritis, gout, cataracts, acid reflux, and more. And again, our government is telling people, eat more of these things. It just, it's a crazy situation. And I'll get to that later. Sorry if I'm moving fast, but hey, I gotta do it. Gotta keep moving. Another way that producers control consumer behavior is through this very aggressive legislative agenda that I mentioned at the beginning of my talk. Some of you have heard of some of these. Some of you have not heard of some of these, but I don't have time to talk about all of them right now. I discussed them at length in the book. Ag-gag laws you've all heard of. These are the laws that make it difficult. They provide enhanced criminal penalties for what would otherwise be fairly innocuous crimes that are related to investigating factory farms and other animal agricultural enterprises. Food defamation laws. These are laws that we have in a quarter of U.S. states that say you can be held civilly liable for defaming animal foods. Oprah Winfrey got sued by the Texas Cattlemen's Beef Association about 15 years ago over an interview with Howard Lyman on her show. Howard Lyman's a retired cattle rancher, now vegan, and she spent $1 million to defend herself in that lawsuit. Cheeseburger laws we have in half of the United States. These are laws that say that a plaintiff cannot recover against a food producer or retailer on a theory that food made the plaintiff obese or contributed to an obesity-related disease. These are designed to prevent the kind of massive judgments and settlements that have been imposed against the tobacco industry. I'll come back to customary farming exemptions. Eco-terrorism laws, these are laws like the AETA at the federal level and other laws at the state level that label environmental and animal activists terrorists completely without cause because there's no history of food terrorism at all in this country. The FBI has never been put on their list of major terrorism cases, but it's a valuable tool for marginalizing your opposition, and for the animal food industry, it's had a lot of economic consequences. But I want to talk about customary farming exemptions because I think for those people who are vegan in this room, there's a good chance that this is why you're vegan. Here's how these work. Every state in the country has an animal cruelty statute, and every state in the country has an exception to that animal cruelty statute. And the exception, now, 37 states have adopted these exceptions by statute. The other 13 have adopted them through the process of judicial decision-making or the common law. So every state has these. And the way they work is there's a carve-out for farm animals. It says farm animals are not protected by our animal cruelty statute. It's that simple. Farm animals do not have protection from animal cruelty, period. Let me give you an example of how this works. In 1854, Connecticut adopted an anti-cruelty statute, and it was part of a spate of legislation around the country at that time that was intended to protect farm animals. And it said that you can't, behavior that is cruel toward any animal is unlawful. That statute was on the books for over 100 years until 1996, when Connecticut changed its anti-cruelty statute by adopting a customary farming exception. And what that exception says, and although I have this memorized, I've been told I have to read this or it's not credible, because it is incredible what this says. In Connecticut, it is legal to maliciously and intentionally maim, mutilate, torture, wound, or kill an animal, provided the act is done while following generally accepted agricultural practices. Again, it's legal to maliciously and intentionally maim, mutilate, torture, wound, or kill a farm animal. That is standard. That happens to be the language from Connecticut, and I use it because it's shocking language, but that concept is standard throughout the country. Farm animals have no legal protection whatsoever. Two legal commentators who wrote on this recently said, farm animals have no legal protection at all. As far as the law is concerned, they simply do not exist. So, for example, customary farming exemptions say that in every state in this country, it's legal to crush or chop off the testicles of an unanesthetized animal. It's legal to kill chickens in virtually any way that's expedient, including throwing them on a wood chipper, suffocating them, tossing them in a garbage can to starve, etc. It's legal to kill baby pigs by grabbing them by the back legs and beating their heads on the ground. And all the other ones that we're aware of, gestation crates, battery cages, foie gras production, veal crates, etc. A few states have adopted exceptions to some of these rules. Like California, we have Prop 2, which goes into effect in 2015 and says that animals will have not quite as tight quarters, so that battery cages will become larger and gestation crates will become larger. Some people are skeptical about whether that will really do anything, but notwithstanding that, the general widespread rule in every state is farm animals have no legal protection. And farmers don't take advantage of these exceptions because they want to be cruel. They do it because it's cost effective. It would cost 25 cents per animal to anesthetize him before castrating him. But if you raise 100,000 animals a year, guess what? That's $25,000. That's going to kill your bottom line. You're going to be less competitive. So that's why they don't do it. These customary farming exemptions apply to virtually all animals raised for food. They apply to most organic, cage-free, and free-range animals. They apply to many animals that are certified humane. I'm sure Hope's book addresses this, and I hope you'll stick around and hear that too. These exceptions apply to most locally raised animals. They apply to animals not only raised for meat, but to the cows and hens who produce milk, cheese, and eggs. These exceptions apply across the board, is sort of the point. They apply to almost any kind of animal product, regardless what the label says. The situation is no better for fish. Notwithstanding that recent research shows that fish can feel pain and experience stress, fish have no legal protection whatsoever. They can be killed in any way that is expedient or that makes them taste good, and they're routinely killed in ways that are lengthy and painful, like evisceration, suffocation, starvation, being frozen to death, etc. Now, these laws create a valuable framework that surrounds meat and dairy producers with the protection they need to offload massive costs on a society. And I spend half the book talking about this. I need to explain this concept of externalized costs to you. If I take my garbage to the front of my driveway and leave it there for the garbage service to pick up, and I pay them to pick it up, I internalize my cost of garbage collection, which is appropriate. I generated the garbage. If I put my garbage in my trunk and drive it to the beach and throw it in the water at night under cover of darkness, I have externalized my garbage collection costs. That is to say, I've imposed my garbage collection costs on society, and I argue in this book that, metaphorically speaking, animal food producers are dumping their garbage in our parks and in our beaches at midnight, which is to say they are externalizing the very vast majority of their costs. About $414 billion of costs is externalized each year. These are costs that animal food producers generate and shift to society so that we end up paying them. And I don't have time to go into these in detail. There's a chapter in the book devoted to each category, so I encourage you to buy the book and to familiarize yourself with this. I will put this in perspective by saying this figure is greater than half of what we spend on Social Security in this country each year, and it's more than a quarter of Canada's gross domestic product. This is a huge number. I want to put it in perspective in another way, too. That is to say that if you add those externalized costs to the annual retail sales of animal foods, you come up with some interesting formula here. Each year, Americans spend about $251 billion on animal foods, and each year, producers externalize about $414 billion, and that total is about $665 billion of costs imposed on Americans associated with consuming animal foods. Okay, and that yields this formula. For every $1 of animal foods sold at retail, $1.70 in hidden or externalized costs is imposed on American consumers and taxpayers. So, for every time McDonald's sells a Big Mac for $5, another $8 of costs is imposed on everyone, including me, including you. Even if you don't eat meat, you're paying part of that $8. That means a $5 Big Mac really costs $13. And you can do that simple math with any animal food sold in this country today. Now, so I said I was going to talk about ways that producers control our behavior, and I did. I said I was going to talk about economic consequences, and I did briefly. This is covered in a lot of detail in the book. And I want to talk about a couple of things that we can do to address some of these problems. The first suggestion is a tax on all foods that contain any animal products. This is the technical term for this is an excise tax. It's like a sales tax. And to put this in context, in this country we tax tobacco at about the 70% level. So a $5 pack of cigarettes has taxes of about $3.50 tacked on. The tax that I propose for meat, I call it the meat tax, it applies to all animal foods, is a 50% tax. And that tax, together with some other changes that I propose in the book, would reduce consumption of animal foods by about 44% in this country. It would almost chop it in half. And that would have some incredible benefits. Among other things, it would save 170,000 human lives every year. It would save 26 billion animal lives every year. It would allow us to return to its native habitat about 600,000 square miles of land that would no longer be needed to graze livestock or raise feed crops for them. That's an area about twice the size of Texas. And it would allow us to eliminate 3 trillion pounds of carbon emissions every year, or carbon equivalent emissions. That's like removing from service all motor vehicles and motor vessels in this entire country. It would be like everybody returning to walking or riding a bike. Now, there's more on this, but it's covered in the book, and if people have questions, I can address it in Q&A. I know I'm tight on time here. The other thing that you can do if you don't like the terrible consequences associated with animal food production is you can make a decision to eat less. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. I know there are only a few non-vegans in the room. Nonetheless, should you go vegan, you would find your cholesterol would drop by about 25%, your body mass index or your weight would drop by about 18%, and your longevity would go up by about 13%. If you're already vegan, you can take some satisfaction in knowing that you're enjoying these benefits today. Your cholesterol is probably 25% lower than the average, your weight is probably 18% lower, and you'll probably live an extra 13%. Now, okay, last slide. See? Amazing. So, we've come full circle. We're back to Aldous Huxley. He's the guy who wrote Brave New World. And it turned out, I didn't know this until I put this presentation together and looked him up on Wikipedia. He died in 1963, the same year I was born. Some people suggest his reincarnation. I cannot confirm or deny that. I will tell you this because I have maybe have an extra minute or two. This interesting story. He was a big fan of psychedelic drugs, and he died before LSD became a banned substance. It was still unregulated in 1963. And his last words to his wife, he had esophageal cancer. He smoked packs and packs of cigarettes every day. His last words to his wife, he could not speak, but he hand wrote out 100 UG LSD, and that was a prescription for 100 micrograms of LSD, which his wife gave him, and the speculation is he died a very blissful death. And yet the irony is that here is somebody who told us that our government is going to mislead us, and he was a product of the 50s and 60s when cigarette companies, with the backing of the U.S. government, put out these ads saying smoking is not bad for you. There's no evidence that smoking causes lung cancer. And it's incredibly sad and ironic that he was a product of that and of course developed smoking-related cancer. So I want to leave you with two quotes. The first is by Huxley, and he said that facts do not cease to exist simply because they are ignored. During the very short time that it took me to give this talk, 600,000 animals, land animals, were killed for food in this country, and the number is something like 2.5 times that if you add marine animals. 600,000 animals killed in less than a half an hour. The facts of those animals' miserable lives, the facts of their unpleasant deaths, don't cease to exist simply because we forget them or because some people in society choose to deny them or ignore them. Those facts are always there and always real for those animals. Secondly, I want to leave you with this quote by Stalin, who said, "A single death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic." And it's true. We're bombarded with these statistics about animals all the time. I just gave you one, 600,000. Something like 60 billion land and marine animals are killed for food in this country each year. And these statistics are impossible to fathom or understand. And that's why we really need to think about animals as individuals, because every time an individual animal is taken out of that factory farming environment, immediately the animal is shown to have a unique personality with unique needs and wants. So let's think about animals as individuals. And Huxley warned us our government would try to mislead us. He warned us our government would try to get us to buy things we don't need. Let's heed that warning and not let our government tell us what's for dinner, but instead let's think for ourselves, let's make our own decisions. And if you're not already vegan, hopefully let's use that freedom of choice and that informed decision making to decide to boycott this cruel and dysfunctional system. Thank you very much. Take questions, then we'll do the amazing t-shirt contest. Questions? Yes?
I would definitely vote for that 50% meat tax, but I don't know how something like that could ever come about. It seems like maybe, I guess a lot of things that have happened at one time seemed that way.
You know, that's a good point. You know, is this going to happen? Is Congress going to pass a meat tax, 50% meat tax this year? No, but we've got to start the discussion. We've got to put the idea on the table. You know, when Gandhi first set out to achieve independence for India from British rule, it was like, what, are you crazy? That's never going to happen. But his response was, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I think we've got to ask, and you know, we've got to start a dialogue. Cigarettes were not always taxed 70%. The taxes came in the single digits, and they've just risen over the decades. And now states love them because they contribute billions of dollars each year to state tax revenues. Other questions? Okay, it's warm in here. Oh, question?
I just a question about the cheeseburger laws.
Yeah.
Do you know if those were mostly passed before or after the fact?
Before or after?
Tobacco settlement.
Mostly after. Those are mostly the product of the work of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. This is a group of conservative legislators who come together and meet with deep pocket lobbying groups and corporations, and they come up with good ideas for legislation that will protect corporate America. and cheeseburger laws are all based on most of these laws that I showed you came from ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. They're based on templates that they sit down and develop and then give to their legislators who go back to their home states and get them passed. So this cheeseburger law starts with a template called the Common Sense Consumption Act. Eco-terrorism laws started the same way. Yeah.
Were you ever able to quantify like a cruelty cost or a suffering cost?
Yes, I do. I come up with a figure in this book of about $20 billion per year in cruelty costs, and here's how that works. Two agricultural economists published a book a couple of years ago in which they did something really innovative. They ran a live auction in which consumers had the ability to bid using their own money on moving animals from inhumane environments to humane environments. So you could bid on moving hens from battery cages to cage-free environments, moving pigs from gestation crates to pastures. And what they found is that on average people would spend something like $300 to $350 each to completely change a category of animal treatment. So using those numbers and extrapolating them across the other ills in factory farming, I've come up with about $20 billion a year that Americans would be willing to pay to end the cruel practices that are inherent in factory farming. And that economists recognize willingness to pay as an externalized cost of industry. So that theoretically, that is a classic externalized cost of factory farming. So because time is tight, I want to do the T-shirt contest. And I'll introduce it by saying some of the neat facts that you'll learn in this book are protein equivalents, and some of these will blow your mind. This is right out of the USDA's published literature on the protein contents of food. So, for example, a double cheeseburger contains about 21 grams of protein, and a cup of trail mix contains the same. Who knew, right? So for the T-shirt, let's see. Let me pick a good one here. Okay, 3 ounces of ham. 3 ounces of ham contains 18 grams of protein. That's, depending on your weight, that's somewhere between half and a third of what the USDA says you need in protein every day. If you wanted to get that amount of protein from roasted pumpkin seeds, how many ounces of roasted pumpkin seeds would you need? Again, it's 3 ounces of ham, contains 18 grams of protein. How many ounces of roasted pumpkin seeds contain 18 grams of protein?
1 ounce.
4 ounces.
2.
5.
The answer is 2. Thank you very much. I'm available to answer questions, to sign books. I got my business card out there, and if you have any questions